Hey folks, tonight we're diving into the noisy, smoky, and just plain damp world of medieval taverns, the quiet heart of every town, unofficial news hub, and the only place where a knight, a peasant, and a poet can all get equally drunk and wreak havoc. This isn't just a drinking spot, it's where danger, laughter, and disease throw a wild party under a thatched roof. So before you get comfy, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really dig what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always cool to see who's tuning in from around the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soothing white noise, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You've just slogged through a muddy street, smelling like a weird mix of horse, smoke, and questionable soup. Of course, it's either raining or just stopped, so everything's slick, including your one and only pair of shoes. You're tired, starving, and have almost been run over twice by a cart full of turnips. You need a drink. So, how do you find a tavern in a medieval town? No signs, no Yelp reviews, and GPS, forget it. All you've got are your ears. Just follow the noise. Somewhere behind the blacksmith's forge and the fishmonger hawking fresh river eels, there's booming laughter and someone belting out a goose song with way too much enthusiasm. And there it is, a wobbly wooden building that looks like its architecture gave up centuries ago. Hanging over the door is a barely readable wooden sign with a crude painting of a barrel, a bear, or maybe both. Whatever it is, this is the place. Welcome to the tavern. The front step is slick with spilled ale, and when you heave open the heavy iron door, it floods the floor with a stream of liquid that could be considered entertainment all by itself. Instantly, a warm wave of air hits you, thick with smoke, damp straw, old beer, and mystery meat. Like a drunken handshake, you made it inside. The ceiling is so low tall, guys have to duck and drunks get a free concussion. The floor's dirt. Not metaphorically dirt, like literally dirt. Though some genius has scattered straw around to pretend it's clean. Spoiler, it's not. No quiet whispers, no waiters with menus, no polite chit-chat. This is a medieval tavern, with two settings, noisy or closed because of fire. You spot an empty seat on a rickety bench near the hearth, but it's wet because you didn't ask first. Nearby, folks are arguing over a stolen chicken. Someone's passed out. Ladle still in hand, a one-eyed dog lounges on a bone under the table like it's paying rent. And that, my friend, is just the entrance. You've just arrived and already caught the scent of a night that's either unforgettable or best forgotten. The heavy tavern door slams shut behind you, and darkness wraps around your senses like a damp wool blanket. Warm, uncomfortable, and a bit suspicious, your eyes adjust. Candlelight flickers on soot-blackened walls, casting shadows that make even the chairs look like they're about to throw down. The fireplace burns in the far corner, doing double duty warming the room and threatening to torch it. Smoke hangs in the air, trapped inside by a chimney that could house a dead crow. But the worst offender isn't the noise or the heat, it's the smell. The medieval tavern scent is less fresh pine and more emotional trauma in a bottle. First whiff, beer warm, sour, saturating every surface. Beneath that sweat, years of humans, horses, and maybe a mythical creature or two. Mix in some moldy bread, wet straw, and a hint of boiled onions, and you've got a fragrance no perfumer would dare bottle. Tables are carved with initials, crude drawings, and knife scars. Swaying stubbornly with pride, benches sag under the weight of muddy boots, thick cloaks, and questionable life choices. The promised dirt floor is layered with straw to soak up spills. This is just the entrance. You've just stepped in and already caught a whiff of a night you'll either remember forever or want to forget ASAP. As the heavy tavern door slams shut behind you, darkness wraps around your senses like a damp wool blanket. Warm, uncomfortable, and kinda suspicious, your eyes slowly adjust. Candlelight flickers on soot-stained walls, throwing shadows that dance so wildly even the chairs look ready to throw down. A fire burns in the far corner, doing double duty as heater and potential arsonist. Smoke hangs in the air, nowhere near escaping, through a chimney that could house a dead crow. But the thing that really gets under your skin, it's not the noise or the heat. It's the smell. Medieval tavern aroma, less eau de cologne, more emotional trauma in a bottle. Top notes of beer warm, sour, and coating every surface. Beneath that sweat, years of humans, horses, and maybe something mythical. Add a hint of moldy bread, wet straw, and some boiled onion, and you've got a cocktail no perfumer would dare bottle. Tables carved with initials, crude doodles, and knife scars. They sway with stubborn pride. Benches sag under muddy boots, thick cloaks, and questionable life choices. The floor's just dirt like promised, but topped with straw to soak up spills, spit, and occasionally passed out patrons. You tread carefully. One wrong step, and your foot sinks into something best left undescribed. The crowd is a living, breathing beast. Loud laughter erupts in one corner. Two men arguing over the price of a pig across the room. A woman slams her mug down hard enough to spill half her drink, and no one bats an eye. A guy at the next table stares at you like he's either deep in thought or forgot how chairs work. In one corner, two men argue over pig prices. In another, a woman smacks her cup so hard she spills half her drink, and no one even flinches. A man nearby stares at you with the blank expression of someone either deep in their own head or unsure how to sit. Someone nearby sneezes. Suddenly, the whole left side of the room seems to lean away, like it's avoiding the sneeze's wrath. And despite this brutal assault on your modern sensibilities, there's something oddly welcoming about the place. The tavern is alive. It's raw, unfiltered, and as rough as medieval community centers get no hygiene guarantees and about 400% more yelling. Seriously, a medieval community center with zero sanitation and yelling that could wake the dead. You find your seat. It's a bit damp, maybe cursed, but for now, it's yours. At first glance, the tavern looks like someone tossed furniture around during an earthquake and just left it like that. No blueprints, no fancy bar, no cozy booths in the back, just a bunch of tables, long benches, barrels, and occasionally a barrel doubling as a chair. Everything's either too close or way too far apart, depending on how drunk you are. The fireplace is the one real centerpiece. A roaring fire blazes against the wall, doing its best to provide warmth, light, and just enough smoke to keep the room interesting. People crowd around it like moths except with mugs. The best seats soak up all the heat. If you're left out in the cold, well, that's what beer is for. The bar, if you can call it that. is usually just a thick wooden plank balanced on two barrels, sagging under the weight of jugs, pitchers, and elbows. Behind it stands the innkeeper, pouring drinks, yelling orders, and shooting daggers with their eyes at the guy in the corner like, hey, you still owe me for last Tuesday. No menus here. You ask what's available and brace yourself. The answer is usually beer or a deathly silence. A narrow, probably original staircase, definitely broken, leads upstairs to rooms. Squint, and you might spot a boot hanging from one of the banisters. Nobody's sure if it's decoration or a warning. Some taverns have rooms in the back, maybe for storage, maybe for illegal gambling, or maybe it's where the last jerk who insulted the barmaid got taken and never came back. Best not to ask. The walls are stained with candle soot, windows covered with oilcloth or animal hide, every surface polished smooth by generations of elbows, boots, spilled drinks, and possibly a chicken. Somehow, despite the chaos or because of it, it works. Everyone knows where to go, where to sit, when to shout, and when to duck their head. It's not organized, but it's alive. Every medieval tavern has a boss, and it's not the local lord or tax collector. It's the innkeeper. They might not wear a crown, but don't be fooled. This is the person running the show. They juggle roles: cook, server, accountant, babysitter, and bouncer all in one. The innkeeper is one person, and they won't tolerate nonsense. If it's a man, he's probably as big as a beer barrel with arms, salt and pepper hair, grumpy, and made from pickled meat and bad decisions. If it's a woman, which it often is, she's sharper than a blacksmith's file and can silence the whole room with a single look. Either way, they've seen it all, heard worse, and wiped blood off straw before breakfast. They greet regulars with a nod, eye strangers with suspicion, and deal with troublemakers with a well-aimed smack on the head. Behind the bar, they keep track of who pays, who owes, and who's had too much all without writing a single note. Since literacy was a rare luxury, but their memory of the tavern is legendary. The innkeeper sets the vibe. If they're in a good mood, the place buzzes. If not, you better drink fast and save your jokes for yourself. They're the referee in every argument, judge in every scandal, and first to grab the club when a fight breaks out. Starting trouble, not on their watch. The innkeeper, oh, they know everything. Who's in debt, who's cheating, who showed up in town using a fake name. Need info, just bribe the bartender. Need protection, sit close to them. Need help, well, good luck. Better hope you didn't smash a mug last week. Some folks have helpers' kids, spouses, or orphans. They've been put to work hauling barrels twice their weight. These assistants serve drinks, mop floors, and try not to spill anything or get trampled by drunks. So yeah, the pub looks chaotic, but it's actually a fragile little ecosystem. At the center, like a storm god in an apron, is the only one keeping the beer flowing and the roof from collapsing during a riot, the innkeeper. Finally, you flop down on a creaky bench, dodging elbows and spilled stew. Your throat's dry, your shoes are damp, and now it's time for the main event drinks. But don't expect a fancy wine list or a shiny glass. This is a medieval tavern. Choices are limited, sketchy, and possibly deadly. Let's start with the classic brew, unfiltered, unpasteurized, and often brewed in the back room where the dog sleeps. It's thick, cloudy, and usually has floating bits grains, yeast, or maybe last customer's mustache. No ice because, hello, no refrigerators. You don't ask how long it's been in the barrel. You just drink and hope for the best. Next up, mead. Sounds fancy. Right, actually. It's sweet, strong, and sometimes a little explosive. If the innkeeper made it, it might be delicious or taste like regret and bee venom. Usually served to nobles, wedding guests, or some poet hoping to be paid in gold or honey wine. There's also cider made from apples, either freshly picked or dropped on the ground 3 weeks ago. Spicy, sour, and served in cracked mugs that double as soup bowls in the morning. Popular in orchard-heavy regions, or for anyone who needs enough booze to forget the guy sitting next to them. Wine technically, yes, but unless you're in Southern Europe or a local noble, it's probably watered down, sour, and served with a side of sarcasm. Good wine's only for lords, bishops, and merchants who just sold 12 barrels of salt, and water bold choice, since it sometimes hides invisible death. Boiling costs fuel, and clean wells are rare. That's why even kids drink beer. The problem isn't noise. It's not dying of dysentery before age 8. Nobody's measuring shots or mixing cocktails here. You drink from wooden, clay, or tin cups. Some still carry last night's stew. You lift your cup, sniff, and take a sip. It's warm, bitter, and somehow perfect, because in a medieval tavern, if the wet stuff doesn't kill you instantly, it's a good drink. Survived the booze, big deal. Now your stomach's growling, reminding you that you haven't eaten since sunrise, and your last meal was mostly barley and regret. Mealtime. But don't get excited. No menu, no waiter, and definitely no one asking about your diet. You don't order food in a medieval tavern. You ask what's left and hope it's hot and just a little mysterious. The main dish is usually a thick stew made from whatever grains, veggies, and suspicious proteins showed up that day. It's been cooking in the same pot since Monday, and today's Thursday, new stuff gets added daily. Nothing gets thrown out. It's more of a preserved moment in culinary history than a meal. If there's meat, congrats. Probably rabbit, pigeon, or some unlucky chicken that wandered too close to the fire. If it's wild game, it might be delicious or just overcooked and desperately seasoned. Your bowl is wood or clay. Your spoon could be your own or your hand. Most folks carry their own knives, so you better bring yours. And don't expect napkins. Just the sleeve of your tunic or a communal rag that's seen things you'd never want to know about. Your spoon or your hand spoon. Most folks bring their own knives, so if you want to eat, you better have your own blade. And forget about napkins, just the sleeve of your tunic, or a communal rag that's seen things no one ever forgets. Also, bread, hard, dark, and heavy, more weapon than food. If it's soft, congrats. It was baked today. If it's hard, well, it's been sitting there since last week. Either way, it pairs nicely with cheese that smells like an old boot and has started developing its own personality. Sometimes salted fish, sometimes salted eggs. Occasionally, you find a tavern with a special dish, which is just a fancy way of saying, we have way too much of this. Flavor, options, texture completely unpredictable, but with a crackling fire, the noise all around, and the warmth of food in your hands. It's not so bad. Too full, too hot. And if you don't think too hard about what's floating in your bowl, it can even be kinda comforting. You're not here for a gourmet dinner. You're here to eat like a survivor. Once you snag a seat, preferably one without a dagger on it, you start to notice The real entertainment people. The medieval tavern was basically the original social media feed, noisy, chaotic, half-baked, and totally committed to oversharing. To your left, there's a red-faced farmer on his fourth beer, telling the same story about his cow giving birth sideways. He slaps your shoulder mid-story, like you're an old friend or a decent stand-in for the pig he usually drinks with. At the far end, a hooded stranger sits in the shadows, sipping slowly. Could be a runaway monk, a bandit, or just someone terrible at eye contact. Either way, don't chit-chat with him unless you want to disappear behind the stables. Near the fire, a soldier in battered armor is regaling everyone with battle tales. His story involves dragons, the French, and a talking sword. Definitely not true. Nobody cares. His tankard is full, and his audience is laughing. There's a sweaty, loud merchant yelling grain prices no one asked for. He pulls out gold coins from his pouch like a midnight mugging victim begging for mercy. A pair of locals are dice playing on a warped table, faces tense. One's clearly cheating. The other knows but lets it slide, probably saving the fight for after the beer runs out. A singer strums in the corner, his hoarse voice hitting the high notes of a love song that sounds suspiciously like something he just made up. Nobody minds. He's wearing pants and singing well. That's already better than last night's guy. Women wander through the crowd. Some are tavern staff, others run their own businesses. They're sharp, confident, and definitely not to be underestimated. They'll flirt, joke, or punch you in the teeth, depending on your tone. Kids dart between legs, grabbing scraps of bread or leftover coins. No one stops them. It's just part of the rhythm. Everyone's watching, drinking, calculating, and pretending not to notice the man passed out under the table. This tavern isn't just about eating and drinking. It's a live, raw performance. And tonight, you're part of the cast. Forget the lute and ballads for a sec. The real soundtrack of a medieval tavern isn't a song. It's a symphony of chaos. It starts with clinking glasses, dozens of mugs banging on wood to celebrate, negotiate, or get drunk. Some clang happily, others shatter completely. Both get cheers, then comes the laughter, loud, booming laughter that sounds like a wild boar escaping, mostly nonsense. A farmer giggles over his hay joke, a knight chuckles at the word pottage, a monk wheezes uncontrollably whenever someone says duck. You quickly learn not to ask why. Drink. It's a vivid, raw performance, and tonight, you're part of the cast. Forget lute and ballads for a moment. The real soundtrack of a medieval tavern isn't a song. It's a symphony of chaos. It starts with the clinking of mugs, dozens banging on wood to celebrate, negotiate, or get drunk. Some sing a happy jingle, others smash entirely. Both get cheers, then comes the laughter, loud, booming laughs that sound like a wild boar's chuckle. Most of it makes zero sense. A farmer giggles over his hay joke, a knight snickers at the word pottage, a monk wheezes uncontrollably whenever someone says duck. You quickly learn not to ask why. Voices overlap, each louder than the last, fighting for dominance like roosters in a coop. There's arguing, storytelling, shouting about taxes, and at least one guy misquoting scripture to win a bet. The barkeep shouts orders while swatting flies. A barmaid yells at a guy trying to grab her, and someone chants a battle cry on loop in the corner. The singer, with half his lute and 3 strings missing. plays 4 chords on repeat, occasionally throwing in poems about lost love, found chickens, or nobles wearing their pants backward. Nobody listens unless duck. You quickly learn not to ask questions. Voices pile on top of each other, each one louder than the last. Fighting for dominance like roosters in a coop. There's arguing, storytelling, yelling about taxes, and at least one person misreading the Bible just to win a bet. The bartenders yelling orders and shooing flies at the same time. A barmaid screams right in the face of a guy trying to grab her, while someone else keeps repeating a chant like a battle cry, and in the corner, the singer, with a half-broken guitar and 3 missing strings, plays the same 4 chords over and over, occasionally tossing in some lost love poems, stories about found chickens, or nobles wearing their pants backwards. Nobody really listens unless he starts singing about someone in the room. That's when things get either really interesting or really dangerous. Someone spills a drink. Someone burps loud enough to shake the ceiling beams. Another person falls off their chair and keeps going, talking on the floor like it was all part of the show. Behind us, dogs barked. No. Wait, a goat was making noise. Why is there a goat? And chairs scraping across the floor sounded like thunder in a wooden cave. Peaceful, nope, but strangely rhythmic. Sometimes the room would suddenly go quiet, not by choice, just an abrupt silence, lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then someone heroically ripped a fart, and the party roared back to life. This wasn't background noise. It was the heartbeat of the tavern, raw, loud, and endlessly alive. If you listen close enough, you start to make sense of it. A weird kind of harmony born from chaos, and like the rest of the tavern, it only got louder the longer you stayed. As the ale flowed and the stew settled, the tavern transformed. It wasn't just a place to eat anymore. It turned into a medieval casino, minus the velvet ropes, but with extra yelling. Gambling was the evening sport, and everyone joined in, from battle-hardened soldiers to barefoot kids borrowing dice. No dealers, no casino manager, no rules, just a cracked wooden table, a handful of coins, and a vague promise that someone was about to lose their dignity. Dice were the game of choice, carved from bone, wood, or whatever was lying around. They clattered on the table like thunder, each throw accompanied by cheers, groans, and accusations of witchcraft. No one trusted the dice. Everyone used them anyway. Then came the cards. If you were in a slightly fancier part of town, the decks were thick, hand-painted, worn out, and always missing 1 or 2 cards. Rules changed depending on who was telling them. Sometimes you aimed for the highest number. Other times, you matched symbols or just made up your own game, like poker, but with more slaps. Stakes ranged from cash and drinks to livestock. Yep. Some folks wanted a nice goat. Others bet their shoes. And some even gambled their freedom that night. Spoiler alert, he lost. The regulars were sharp. They moved fast, rolled slow, and smiled just a bit too wide. Of course they cheated. That's half the fun. There was always a sneaky die around here, a marked card over there, a mysterious cough when the lucky player leaned in. Win big. You bought the next round or risked getting jumped. Lose bigs. You smiled, pretended it didn't hurt, and slowly pushed your chair toward the door. Side games popped up too: arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the crowd favorite who could drink the most without passing out. The winner got applause, The loser got a night under the table and a headache lasting until the next market day. But even with unclear rules and ridiculous stakes, this energy was addictive because in a medieval tavern, luck wasn't just a game, it was a gamble with your wallet, your pride, and maybe your pants. When night fell and the tavern filled with warmth and humidity, a new kind of performance kicked off, a mix of words, music, and utterly misplaced confidence. It was storytelling time, medieval style. Bard cleared his throat in the corner, gently plucking a half-tuned lute that sounded more like creaky old shoes. He was missing a few teeth, but not an ounce of confidence. With dramatic flair, he launched into a ballad about misery and heroism. There was a tale about a knight who fell in love with a mermaid and drowned while reciting poetry. Nobody believed him. Still, people listened. That's just how things rolled here. Truth was optional. Entertainment was everything. Around the table, others joined in, not bards, just patrons with beer-fueled courage and a story to tell. One man swore he wrestled a bear and lived to drink another day. Another claimed he saw a witch turn a cow into a goat. A third insisted he was related to Charlemagne through some cousin on his mom's side. Everyone's story started with "you won't believe this," but it's true. We don't believe it either, but we want to. Boasts turned into ballads, accidents turned into legends. Someone tells a joke so bad it circles back to being hilarious. Then another person reads a poem that might as well be copied from some monk's scroll. Everyone in the room reacts clapping, yelling, or chucking bread depending on how good or awful the performance is. If you're lucky, a wandering singer might stroll through. These pros travel town to town, trading tunes for coins, a meal, and sometimes a roof over their heads. Their songs are polished, their stories long, and their crowd-whipping skills borderline dangerous. But even they know the golden rule of pub tales: never let the truth ruin a good story. In this smoke-filled room, with crackling fire and clinking mugs, storytelling isn't just entertainment, it's tradition, connection, how you make friends, enemies, and sometimes find a drinking buddy for life. By midnight, half the pub reenacts the legend of the one-legged knight who took down 6 highwaymen with nothing but a ladle. You laugh, cheer, and forget it's all made up, because in a medieval tavern, every liar is a legend if the story's good enough. As night deepens and the ale keeps flowing, something shifts in the air of bold, drunken bravado. The singer's halfway through his third song about unfaithful shepherd girls, and suddenly, romance is in the room. Welcome to medieval flirting, folks. Subtlety left the building ages ago. It starts with eye contact, or at least one eye squinting through the honeymead haze. A guy with 2 crooked teeth leans over the bench and says, "Madam, your beauty outshines the hearth's fire." She responds by chucking a piece of bread at his forehead. The room goes wild. Others try their luck more gently, filling cups, offering awkward compliments, or volunteering to carry a stew bowl so it doesn't spill. Spoiler alert, it still spills. If you're a lady in the tavern staff, patron, or traveling merchant, you're probably used to fending off at least 3 aspiring poets, 2 wrestlers, and 1 guy trying to impress you by balancing a knife on his nose. Sometimes it works. Usually, it ends with a black eye or an empty purse. For those actually looking for company, the tavern offers more than flirting. The courtesan moves through the room with ease, knowing who's loaded, who's got charms, and who'll pass out before they make it upstairs. Deals happen quietly, but carry heavy weight. Jealous lovers? Definitely. Nothing sparks a tavern brawl faster than a glance, a wandering hand, or a husband catching his wife laughing too hard at the minstrel's joke about bishops. Tables overturn, mugs become weapons. The bench breaks in half again. But somewhere in that chaos, real sparks fly. The shy baker's daughter and the stonemason share laughs over the communal stew. Two drunk farmers bond over their mutual hatred of turnips. A monk accidentally flirts with a nun. Love, or something like it, exists even in the darkest corners, because in the medieval tavern, romance means charm, opportunity, and not face planting into your bowl halfway through. You might win a heart, you might get slapped. Either way, you'll remember it or at least hear about it the next morning. It's bound to happen. Maybe someone spilled a drink. Maybe someone accused another of cheating at dice. Maybe two people fought over a seat and neither backed down. Or maybe someone said something about someone else's mother. Goat meat or soup doesn't really matter. Suddenly, chaos erupts. What was a mix of music and mugs turns on a dime. A chair flies. An oil flask crashes to the floor. Someone yells, "Hold my bread," and charges. They glide over the bench like a drunk pilot. No one's shocked. In fact, most don't even stop drinking. A tavern brawl in medieval times wasn't rare. It was basically a feature. Sure, it sounds scary, but it's usually more funny than deadly. People stumble, slip, trip, and fall into two people fighting over a chair, neither willing to back down. Or maybe someone just insulted the other's mother. Goat meat or soup, well, honestly, who cares suddenly? It all kicks off in the tavern. What used to be a mix of music and mugs quickly turns into chaos. A flying chair, an oil cart crashing to the floor. Someone yells, "Hold my bread," and charges in. They weave through the benches like a drunk pilot. Nobody bats an eye, actually. Most folks don't even stop drinking. A bar fight in medieval times wasn't rare. It was basically the house special. Sounds scary. Nah, mostly hilarious, rather than deadly. Looks scary, but it's usually more funny than deadly. People sway wildly, slip, trip, and crash into someone's dinner. Hair gets yanked, beards grabbed, shirts torn. The innkeeper roars like a general on the battlefield, while one hand holds a ladle and the other a stick. Sometimes, folks jump into the brawl without knowing why. They just see the action and start swinging first. Others place unofficial bets, cheer, or slide their cups out of the way. Weapons rare. Most people know better. Drawing a sword in a tavern could turn a normal bar fight into a full-on disaster. Just see the action and jump in swinging first. Others place unofficial bets, cheer, or slide their cups out of the way. Weapons rare. Most people know better. Drawing a sword in a tavern could turn a normal bar fight into a full-on disaster. Weapons are rare. Most people know better. Pulling a sword in a tavern could turn a usual scrap into a full-blown catastrophe. Warm beer. Eventually, someone hits the floor and stays put. Another trips over a wall and decides that's the perfect spot to sit down and rethink their life choices. The fight dies out like a candle in the tavern suddenly and without ceremony. Here's the weird part. Once it's over, it's really over. The fighters separate, mugs refill, someone starts a song, and within 10 minutes, everyone's laughing again, even the guy with the bleeding nose. No grudges, no lawsuits, just bruises, stories, and maybe a new nickname like One-Eyed Arnold or benchwarmer Bill, because in a medieval tavern, a fight was just part of a great night, messy, ridiculous, and oddly bonding. And if no one got seriously hurt, it was just another form of entertainment. So the brawl ends, the bard has passed out mid-ballad, and your stomach is full of mystery stew and lightly fermented cider. Time to sleep. Or at least, try to sleep, but don't expect a feather bed or lavender-scented sheets. This is a medieval tavern, not a spa. If the tavern offers lodging, you might have to climb a creaky staircase, upstairs, across slanted floors and low beams designed to test your skull's durability. The rooms are small, cold, and totally shared. No privacy. You're sleeping, shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Some snore like church bells. Others dream in languages you've never heard. Beds, technically, are mostly straw-stuffed mattresses, thin, lumpy, and filled with what medieval folks affectionately called companions. You lie down fully clothed, plus boots on, daggers under your pillow, not for comfort but for defense, and blankets are communal, as are the smells. And if someone ate garlic, someone always ate garlic, that scent becomes an intimate part of your dreams. If you're too poor or too drunk to rent a room, you'll crash downstairs on a bench, under a table, or curled up in a corner near the hearth beside a dog that may or may not belong to the tavern. You'll get stepped on, sneezed on, maybe even used as a footrest. The tavern is never really quiet. Even after the last mug is drained and the last argument settled, there's always someone mumbling in their sleep, a log crackling in the fire, or a distant fart echoing through the rafters. But somehow, you still drift off. It's not comfy, it's not particularly clean, but it's safe enough. The fire keeps the brutal cold at bay. The innkeeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand, and the noise becomes your personal lullaby. Familiar, human, alive. You wake up with a sore neck, dry mouth, and a bruise you can't explain, but within hours, you've slept alongside travelers, thieves, peasants, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring, straw, and the faint hope your shoes are still there. In the morning, dawn sneaks in like an uninvited guest, threading pale light through the shutters and poking mercilessly at your eyelids. The tavern has changed overnight, not exactly quieter, but quiet in a defeated way. You open one eye, someone's stepping on your chest. Another is mumbling in their sleep about sheep taxes. The poet is snoring under the table, clutching his lute like a lover. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at leftover bread crust from yesterday. Nobody questions where it came from. The fire's out, making the room cold and smoky. A few patrons start to stir the beams, but somehow you still drift off. It's not comfy, not very clean, but kinda safe. The fire keeps the brutal cold away. The innkeeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand, and the noise turns into its own lullaby, familiar, human, alive. You wake up with a stiff neck, dry mouth, and a mysterious bruise, but for a few hours, you slept alongside travelers, thieves, farmers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring, straw, and a faint hope your shoes are still there in the morning. Dawn sneaks in like an uninvited guest, poking pale light through the shutters and mercilessly jabbling at your eyelids. The tavern had changed overnight, not quieter, just quieter in the we lost kind of way. You open one eye. Someone's stepping on your chest with their boots. Another is mumbling in his sleep about sheep taxes. The poet snores under the table, clutching his lute like a lover. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at leftover bread crust from yesterday. No one questions where it came from. The fire's out, leaving the room cold and smoky. A few patrons start to stir, groaning like wounded warriors battling internal wars. The table, clutched like a lover's embrace with their spoils. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at leftover bread crust from yesterday. No one even wonders where it came from. The fire's gone out, leaving the room cold and smoky. A few patrons start to stir, groaning like wounded warriors from battles fought entirely inside their own skulls. One man sits up, looks around, then lies back down, decides today's just not worth the effort. The tavern keeper wakes up because the fire's gone out, making the room cold and smoky. A few patrons start to stir, groaning like wounded warriors from battles fought entirely inside their own skulls. One man sits up, looks around, then lies back down, decides today's just not worth the effort. The tavern keeper wakes up because a few patrons start to stir, groaning like wounded warriors from battles fought entirely inside their own skulls. One man sits up, looks around, then lies back down, decides today's just not worth the effort. The tavern keeper wakes up because one man sits up, looks around, then lies back down, decides today's just not worth the effort. The tavern keeper wakes up because, of course, they're clinking cups, sweeping straw into a new pile, reheating something in a pot that smells both inviting and a little hateful. They glance at the bodies on the floor, then bang the ladle against a cup. Of course, they're clinking cups, sweeping straw into a new pile, reheating something in a pot that smells both inviting and a little hateful. They glance at the bodies on the floor, then bang the ladle against a cup, like a morning bell tolling from hell. Get up or get out, that's your wake-up call. No buffet breakfast here, if you're lucky. You'll get some soup, even thicker than last night. Bread reheated, beer watered down, and nobody's like a morning bell tolling from hell. Get up or get out, that's your wake-up call. No buffet breakfast here, if you're lucky. You'll get some soup, even thicker than last night. Bread reheated, beer watered down, and nobody's left impressed. Some customers just dunk their heads in the rain barrel outside and call it fresh air. You check your pockets, 2 coins and a button. Better than expected, your shoes are still here. One's got bite marks. But hey, they're yours. A win. Some new faces appear, early risers, travelers, workers needing a drink before dealing with livestock, taxes, or worse, neighbors. The tavern starts stirring again, like a beast slowly waking up. Someone begins retelling last night's story. Of course, it's changed. Now there are 2 battles, and the bar song has conjured a ghost. Everyone nods like it's totally obvious. That night was chaos. The morning's groggy, grimy, and full of regret. But you're still smiling because somehow you survived. By now, you feel the sweat, smoke, and beer stench stuck under your boots. You survived the shouting, flirting, the stew, and maybe even a flying chair. And through it all, one thing becomes clear: a medieval tavern isn't just a place to drink. It's the community's heart. In a world without phones, newspapers, or social media, the tavern was the news hub. A merchant from the coast could share rumors from a foreign port. A soldier could describe war from the front lines. A poet could sing songs that tied everyone together, even if the lyrics changed every night. This was where people connected. Farmers drank beside craftsmen, pilgrims shared bread. With thieves, strangers became friends, or at least drinking buddies for round two. Here, social classes blurred, rumors were born, alliances formed, and grudges either buried or sparked again, depending on luck. The tavern was also business central. Deals made, contracts broken over spilled cider and broken glass. It was court, confessional, and theater all in one. You could find a job, lose your wallet, get married, or start a fight all in one night. And it gave you something else, something you couldn't buy at the market or pray for in a chapel. The comfort of escaping the cold, the work, the never-ending seriousness of medieval life. For a few hours, you could sit by the fire, endure a terrible joke, sing a worse song, and forget the harshness of the outside world, even when the beer's warm, the bed's itchy, and the food's got more bones than broth. The tavern gave you the feeling of being alive among other living humans. And in an age when everything from disease and war to brutal winters could hit without warning, that was no small thing. So, when you walk into a medieval tavern, you're not just buying a drink, you're buying furniture, stories, and maybe, if the floor isn't too crowded, a place to sleep where the fire still burns. Because long before coffee shops, pubs, and tea houses, there were taverns, loud, dirty, authentic, and totally unforgettable. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a confident gaze. Nefertiti was a woman wrapped in mystery. Her name means the beautiful one has come, but no one knows exactly where she came from. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named Ai, maybe even the sister of Akhenaten. Others say she was a foreign princess sent to Egypt in a marriage alliance. Her origins are still debated, but her influence is undeniable. Nefertiti bursts onto the historical scene like a lightning bolt, sudden, brilliant, and transformative. She entered Akhenaten's life not as a passive queen, but as an equal partner, Sixians. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named Ai, maybe even Akhenaten's sister. Others think she was a foreign princess sent to Egypt in a political marriage. Her origins remain debated, but her influence is undeniable. Nefertiti bursts onto history's stage like a lightning bolt, sudden, brilliant, and transformative. She didn't just step into Akhenaten's life as a passive queen, but as an equal partner in a dynasty that would shake Egypt's religious and cultural foundations. Together, they shattered centuries of tradition, tore down temple after temple, and worshipped the sun disk as the one true God. This was radical, almost heretical stuff, and Nefertiti wasn't just watching from the throne. She led ceremonies, offered sacrifices, and was even depicted in art punishing enemies, a role usually reserved for male pharaohs. Unlike other queens who got shoved into the background, Nefertiti was front and center. She showed up in more art from that era than Akhenaten himself, and in those images, she didn't look like a submissive sidekick. She stood tall, sometimes even bigger than life, literally holding power in her hands, and in a society where pharaohs were basically gods. Her close partnership with Akhenaten spiritually and politically hinted at something bigger. Maybe she wasn't just a queen. Maybe she was co-ruler. But this rise didn't come without drama. Egypt wasn't quite ready for this shakeup. The old priesthood was furious about losing their gods and temples. The capital got moved to a new city, Akhetaten, now called Amarna, cutting ties with all the old customs. And through it all, Nefertiti stayed put, her image carved into stone walls, her name sung in sun worship hymns. But despite her presence in life, her death is a total vanishing act. No tomb, no body, no confirmed ending, just silence. It's like history saw her brilliance and then suddenly decided to look the other way. And maybe that's where her legend really begins. To get Nefertiti's rise, you first have to meet the man who flipped everything upside down, Pharaoh Akhenaten. He wasn't born with that name. He started out as Amenhotep IV, a prince inheriting 1,000 years of gods and tradition. But something inside him changed. Some say divine inspiration, others call it madness. When he took the throne, he turned his back on the mighty god Amun and dropped a new truth bomb. There's only one God worth worshipping, the sun itself. Aten. This wasn't just a religious switch-up. It was an earthquake that shattered the foundations of Egyptian civilization. Imagine a society built around temples, priests, and rituals, suddenly told their gods were wrong, their worship outdated. Akhenaten didn't just preach monotheism, he forced it. The temples of Amun got shut down. His name was chiseled off statues, statues smashed, whole cities abandoned. Instead, Akhenaten built something new, Akhetaten, a city devoted to Aten, where the sun rose straight through the cliffs and bathed the city in sacred light. And through it all, Nefertiti stood right beside him, not some silent wife, but a full-on player. In the reliefs of the time, she's shown worshipping Aten with the same reverence as Akhenaten. Their daughters are often shown walking with them, heads tilted toward the bright sun. This family portrait was unlike any other Egyptian art before or after. Even the style changed. No more stiff and formal. Now it's relaxed, exaggerated, sometimes even intimate. The king and queen kissing, playing with their kids, praying in soft robes under the sun. Nefertiti was everywhere in this new world. Sometimes she even upstaged her husband. Some historians think she held the real political power, maybe even acting as co-regent. There are inscriptions calling her Nefertiti, a name some believe she used when she started ruling on her own. It's unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, strategy, or necessity. But one thing's obvious: without Nefertiti, this revolution might not have lasted so long. But revolutions are fragile. The gods don't, like being replaced. And the people quietly watched, waiting for the old order to come back. At the peak of her power, Nefertiti became more than a queen. She turned into a symbol not just of Nefertiti, a name some believe she adopted when she started ruling with her own authority. It's unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, strategy, or necessity. But one thing's clear: without Nefertiti, this revolution might not have lasted so long. But revolutions are fragile. The gods don't, like being replaced. And the people silently watch, waiting for the old order to come back. At the height of her power, Nefertiti became more than a queen. She became a symbol not just of beauty, but of sacred femininity and royal power. Egypt had seen great queens like Akhenaten, Nefertari, Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti's presence felt different. She didn't rule from the shadows or seize power through war. She was reshaping the game in Egyptian culture and spirit. She stood beside her husband like a living goddess. She gave Akhenaten 6 daughters: Meritaten, Meketaten, Unkesenpaten, and the gang. They all show up pretty often in the art. Family scenes bathed in Aten's light. Oddly, no sons were confirmed in a kingdom obsessed with lineage. This was both a political headache and a historical mystery. Fate, or something fishier going on, some think Akhenaten might have. Had sons with other wives, or even juicier, with Nefertiti herself, sparking modern rumors and some seriously uncomfortable theories, from wild guesses to downright scandalous. One thing's clear: motherhood was central to her image. In art, Nefertiti is shown cradling her kids, their tiny hands touching her cheeks. These aren't stiff, cold statues. They're lively moments carved in stone, intimate, emotional, and glowing. In an era when pharaohs were usually distant gods, portraying Nefertiti as a nurturing mom softened that divine vibe, making her way more relatable. But wait, there's another side to her image, a much tougher one. In many depictions, Nefertiti wears the blue crown, usually reserved for ruling men. She's shown beating enemies, riding chariots, offering gifts without Akhenaten in sight. This isn't just symbolic posturing. This queen was performing the sacred duties of a king. It hints at a silent but profound truth. Nefertiti might have been gearing up for something bigger than just a partnership. Maybe she was preparing to rule. Rumors claim that as Akhenaten's health declined, maybe from genetic issues or stress, Nefertiti took on more ruling responsibilities. But this is where the record starts to fade. In Akhenaten's later years, she vanished from the public eye. No ceremonies, no monuments, no official burial. Did she die young, lose power, or was she about to become an even greater queen? History tried to erase her, but failed. One day, Nefertiti was everywhere, carved on walls, praised, in hymns, ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. Then, like a desert breeze, she disappeared. No other ancient Egyptian queen stood out quite like her, yet. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the records go strangely silent. Her name vanishes from inscriptions. Her image fades from artwork. No tomb, no death announcement, no mourning scenes. For a woman central to Egypt's cultural shakeup, her absence isn't just strange, it's a black hole in history. So what happened to her? The simplest guess offers an answer. She died. Childbirth was dangerous, even for royalty. Nefertiti's second daughter, Meketaten, also disappears from records around this time, a possible sign of a double tragedy. Mother and child gone in a dark moment. But if that's true, why no elaborate funeral? No offerings? No temples? This was a woman worshipped like a goddess. A quiet death doesn't fit the story. Others suggest a more political explanation. Maybe Nefertiti fell out of favor. Perhaps court politics shifted. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated, might have sidelined her, maybe favoring another wife. Some say a co-ruler named Smenkhkare. a mysterious figure popping briefly in. Historical records may have taken her place. Was he a male heir, a half-brother, or was Smenkhkare actually Nefertiti under a new name? The most shocking theory, Nefertiti never really disappeared. She transformed. There's evidence of someone named Neferneferuaten ruling in Akhenaten's final years. This person used feminine grammar in inscriptions and even called Akhenaten her beloved husband. Could this person used feminine grammar in inscriptions and even called Akhenaten her beloved husband? Could it be Nefertiti, crowned pharaoh in her own right? If yes, she'd join the very exclusive club of female rulers like Hatshepsut. But even that theory crumbled to dust. Neferneferuaten's reign ended abruptly. Then came a more familiar name, Tutankhamun, the young king who reversed his parents' reforms and brought back the old gods. If Nefertiti really ruled solo, it was a blink and you miss it kind of reign. Tutankhamun, the young king who undid his parents' reforms and restored the old gods. If Nefertiti did rule alone, it was a blink and you miss it gig. And if she was actually Smenkhkare or Neferneferuaten, she ruled like a ghost queen only glimpsed through half-carved inscriptions, cracked relics, and fragmentary clues, a puzzle missing its centerpiece. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, Egypt's most powerful woman vanished. She showed up, ruled like a boss, then poof gone, but the legend of her was just getting started. As the dust settled, a new figure emerged, a young king, barely old enough to hold a scepter. His name was Tutankhaten, later changed to Tutankhamun, and he became the world's most famous pharaoh, not for what he did while alive, but for the treasures found in his untouched tomb. But here's the kicker: who was his mom? History's records are maddeningly silent. His dad was almost certainly Akhenaten, but his mother's identity remains a mystery. Some scholars say Nefertiti was his stepmom. Others suggest she might be his real mom, pointing to the art and timing that seemed to show him as a kid during her last public appearance. If Nefertiti really gave birth to Tutankhamun, that would make perfect sense. His early reign was clearly guided by a steady hand, and the decision to undo his father's religious revolution might not have been all his own. That's where the curiosity deepens. Who was steering the ship during Tutankhamun's fragile reign? The young king was just about 9 when he took the throne. A kid can't restore a religious empire on his own. Someone was behind the scenes. Someone savvy in court politics, religion, and public image. Could Nefertiti have been ruling from the shadows? Or was it the high priest? Possibly her father? Maybe both teamed up to squash the chaos of Amarna and bring Egypt back to the old gods. One of the most convincing clues comes from a golden shrine found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It shows a woman anointing the young king. A woman with features eerily like Nefertiti's. If that's her, it means she might not have disappeared but stayed at the power center in a more subtle way. But since there's no tomb with her name, no confirmed mummy, all we have are fragments. If she really guided Tutankhamun, her fingerprints would be everywhere but her name erased, wiped from temples, scrubbed off king lists, as if someone was trying to erase the memory of a woman who once ruled like a god. But the irony is thick. Tutankhamun's fame resurrected her image, because in chasing his story, the world stumbled upon hers. As the queen at the heart of Egypt's most radical era, a priestess, a potential pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb, no monuments bear her name, No coffin, no mask, no whispered last words to the gods, like she just vanished into thin air. This absence has haunted Egyptologists for over a century in a culture obsessed with the afterlife, where every noble was mummified and buried with guides for their soul's journey. How does one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history just disappear? Tons of theories. One says she was buried hastily and without ceremony in the late Amarna years. Maybe her progressive legacy made her dangerous to the new regime. Her tomb could have been dismantled, her name smeared, part of an effort. Did Egyptian history just vanish? Plenty of theories. One is she was buried in a hurry, no ceremony, in the late Amarna days. Maybe her progressive legacy made her a threat to the new regime. Her tomb could have been dismantled, her name smeared, all part of an effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. After all, the old gods made a quick comeback, and revenge carved in stone was pretty standard. A cooler theory? Her tomb was never really lost. It's just misidentified or still hiding. Some scholars think she's chilling in the Valley of the Kings, tucked behind Tutankhamun's tomb walls. Radar scans of KV-62 Tut's famous tomb in 2015 hinted at something mysterious lurking nearby. At possible secret chambers, could Nefertiti be buried just a few inches away, sealed off and forgotten under layers of history and golds? That idea caught the world's imagination, a queen snoozing just out of reach. Egyptologists held their breath, but follow-up scans didn't give clear answers. Excavations slowed, funding dried up, and once again, Nefertiti sank back into legend, but her absence is pretty glaring. We have dozens, maybe hundreds, of images of her carved in stone and painted in pigments. Her bust, now chilling behind glass in Berlin, still stares out with that mysterious charm, like she knows something we don't, like she's waiting. Every year, digs continue at Amarna and the Valley. Every year, whispers resurface. Could a sealed room finally spill its secrets? Could a forgotten cartoon and some dust spell out her real name? Or will she stay the eternal riddle, the unfinished sentence in Egypt's story? If history buried her, success didn't last long, because the hunt for Nefertiti never really stopped. It just got deeper. If her tomb is never found and her body never identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti? The answer lies behind museum glass, under the soft lights, at Berlin's Neues Museum, a painted limestone sculpture that has fascinated the world since its rediscovery in 1912, the bust of Nefertiti. She gazes forward, calm and serene, elegant long neck, striking blue crown, and delicate features almost too modern for her time. One eye unfinished, probably on purpose, or maybe just a workshop fluke at the end of the day. But unfinished or not, she endures impossible to forget. German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt found this bust in the rubble of Thutmose's sculpting workshop at Amarna. When he dusted off her face, he instantly knew he'd hit the jackpot. In his journal, he wrote, "Words are useless. You have to see it with your own eyes." And when the world did, Nefertiti became not just a historical figure, but a global icon of beauty, power, and ancient mystery. But even her bust's chest wasn't free from drama. Germany bought this artifact when cultural property laws were still loose, and Egypt has been demanding its return for decades to Egyptians. She belongs to the homeland, the land where her son once touched her skin, where she stood under the blazing sun, But Germany refused. They claimed her fragile health made travel unsafe. Others say it's about prestige. Nefertiti draws crowds. After all, she's their Mona Lisa, yet, wherever she resides. Her presence changed how the world sees ancient women. She's not just a pretty face. Her bust radiates authority, decisiveness, and almost a cheeky defiance. She looks like someone holding secrets, making decisions, steering an empire's fate. And she did just that. It's pretty amazing that a single silent sculpture can revive a long-gone person through time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died. But through this bust, Nefertiti achieved something extraordinary. She became immortal not in gold, but in humanity's memory. The face stays the same, but the story it tells keeps echoing more than ever. Across centuries, Nefertiti's tale lies somewhere between stone and silence, between what we know and what we want to believe. Few figures from ancient history inspire such endless fascination and deep mystery. She's a paradox, one of the most documented women of her era, yet so much about her remains unknown. But thanks to this bust, Nefertiti did something extraordinary. She became immortal not in gold, but in human memory. The face stays the same, but the story it tells keeps echoing more than ever. Through centuries, Nefertiti's story lives somewhere between stone and silence, between what we know and what we want to believe. Few figures from ancient history inspire such relentless fascination and deep mystery. She's a paradox, one of the most documented women of her era, yet still full of unknowns. Over the centuries, people have imagined countless versions of her. To some, she's a goddess in human form, the living embodiment of divine beauty. To others, a key politician, the power behind the throne, or maybe the throne itself. Some paint her as a tragic romantic figure, forgotten by history's cruel hand. Others see her as ambitious, even ruthless, gracefully steering a collapsing empire with cold calculation. But what do we really know? We know she wasn't just some royal wife. Her image stood shoulder to shoulder with kings. Her presence in religious rites, royal ceremonies, and even battle scenes shows she wasn't just holding power. She knew how to wield it. In a patriarchal world, she carved out her own space not by rebellion, but by presence, calmness, and mastering the visual and spiritual language of her era. We know she was the star player in one of history's boldest religious shakeups, while Akhenaten might have dreamed up the monotheistic sun cult. Nefertiti was its living icon. She was the divine ideal, the bridge between Aten above and humans below. She didn't just serve the gods, she was their image, and we know that. After she vanished, her memory was nearly wiped clean. The fierce backlash against Akhenaten's regime made sure her name faded into oblivion. Her statues were smashed, her tomb inscriptions defaced, her role in history deliberately buried. But 3,000 years later, we're still whispering her name. Why? Because legends outlast facts. Because when a woman becomes both an icon and enigma, she slips into a timeless space, untouched by time. Because sometimes questions echo louder than answers. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what Nefertiti wanted. To be remembered, not explained, admired, not confined, to live forever. Not as some woman of a tomb, but as a queen of endless speculation. More than 3 millennia have passed since Nefertiti last walked under the Egyptian sun, but her shadow stretches across our world, etched in museum glass, whispered in academic halls, popping up in novels and documentaries alike. Unlike most historical figures, she didn't fade into the past. She actually got bigger with us time. There's something irresistible about her, not just the beauty. We've seen beauty before. It's the mystery. The deliberate gaps in her biography feel like a dare, a taunt, as if she's challenging us to try and figure her out, knowing full well we never will. And in that way, she became something beyond history. She became an archetype. Every generation remakes Nefertiti in its own image. Early 20th century, a strange, mysterious, submissive queen. During feminist waves, a symbol of female power. An ancient ruler lost in a patriarchal age. In modern media, a style icon. African queen, politician, maybe even a pharaoh. She's lived 1,000-second lives not through truth, but through imagination. But maybe that's the best kind of afterlife. In ancient Egypt, immortality wasn't just about mummies, it was about memory. If your name is spoken, your image seen, your story told, you live on, you can cross the reed fields, dine with the gods, exist beyond death. Nefertiti, whether by design or accident, achieved that. Her name is spoken across continents. Her face is one of the most recognized in human history. Her story, though fragmented, still grabs attention. So in a way, her greatest legacy isn't carved in a tomb or sealed under desert stone. It's the persistent curiosity she left behind. She left a perfect mystery, a half-lived, half-hidden life, and an utterly unforgettable one. And maybe that's her ultimate power play, not just ruling an empire, shaping religion, or existing with the gods. Beyond death, whether on purpose or by accident, Nefertiti pulled it off. Her name is whispered across continents. Her face, one of the most recognized in human history. Her story, though fragmented, still grabs attention. So, in a way, her greatest legacy isn't carved on a tomb or sealed beneath desert stone. It's the stubborn curiosity she left behind, a perfect mystery, a life half-lived, half-faded, and totally unforgettable. Maybe that's her ultimate power move, not just ruling an empire, shaping religion, or raising royal daughters, but becoming timeless. Nefertiti, the beauty who came, really never left. She's still here in questions, surprises, and the urge to remember the women history tried to erase. She lives, not in gold or glory, but in the eternal act of being sought after. And what's more immortal than that china, where low clouds and breezes drift through bamboo groves? There's a dragon curled up, but hold up, this isn't some fiery myth or legendary beast. This dragon's made of earth and stone, carved over centuries by rough hands and endless patience. These are terraced fields. Locals call the dragon's spine, their curves rippling along the mountainside like shimmering scales of water. Rice and age-old pride from afar. The terraces look like a sleeping creature. The hills rise and fall in perfect rhythm, each layer moving like a living body. But get closer, and you find something even more alive. Water trickles gently through carefully dug canals. Young plants sway in the breeze. And at dawn, morning mist blankets the scene like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. These terraces weren't slapped together overnight. Their story started over 700s, years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao, mountain-loving minorities, decided to tame the steep slopes instead of giving up on them. Flatland was scarce, no machines existed, so they looked at the mountain and asked one simple question: how do we feed ourselves here? It took generations to find the answer, armed only with stone tools and bamboo baskets. They carved inch by inch into the hills, year after year, with every terrace built. They didn't just shape the land, they taught it how to breathe with them. Rain became a resource, the slope became life. Rice, the staple of life, began to grow where gravity once ruled. Over time, the terraces started to look like a resting dragon, strong, eternal, sacred. This isn't just farming, it's harmony, a silent pact between humans and nature. No part of the mountain wasted, no part forced into crazy curves. Instead, humans worked with the earth, shaping it with bends and waves, listening to the wind and water flow. Today, the dragon's spine still feeds the whole village, but more than that, it reminds us what patience can build in a world rushing forward. Here lies a dragon, never chased, only carved, layer by layer, dream by dream. Walking through these long terraces feels like stepping into a world made by sheer persistence. No illusions here, no signs of machinery, no corporate survey marks. What stretches over these mountains is the stubborn fingerprint of humans. Every curve, every slope, every drop of water arranged stone by hands that know the land's heartbeat. Centuries ago, when the Zhuang and Yao first saw these steep, treacherous hills, they didn't see obstacles, they saw opportunity. The fertile valleys were taken, the fields sown, but here, among the jagged peaks, possibility remained. If only they could make the earth listen. Without heavy tools, they started with wooden shovels, stone hoes, baskets for mud, and rubble on backs worn thin by time. Gradually, terraces formed, horizontal veins stretching across the mountain, held in place by stacked stone walls. This wasn't some accidental slash on the slope. They planned it. Each terrace had to be perfectly balanced, not just to hold water, but to move it from one level to the next without waste. One wrong move, and a whole section could collapse. Too steep, and water rushes. Too flat, and it stagnates. So, they measured not with rulers, but with the intuition of generations. Kids learned from elders. Elders watched the seasons. And the mountain finally yielded not by surrender, but by trust, and with no heavy tools, they started using wooden shovels, stone hoes, baskets for mud, and rubble on backs worn thin by time. Gradually, terraces took shape, horizontal ribs across the mountainside, held firm by stacked stone walls. This wasn't some random cut into a slope. They planned it. Each terrace had to be perfectly balanced, not just to hold water, but to channel it from one level to the next without waste. One wrong move and a whole section could collapse. Too steep, and water rushes away. Too flat, and it just sits there, stagnant. So, they didn't measure with rulers, but with the gut feeling passed down through generations. Kids learned from the elders, watched the seasons, and finally, the mountain gives in not because it surrenders, but because it trusts. And the result is a landscape that challenges nature by blending right into it, from valley floors to misty mountain peaks. These terraced fields look like spiral staircases climbing up to the sky. They mirror the terrain so elegantly, you'd think the mountain itself nurtured them. But nope, The mountain didn't draw those curves. Humans did. No fancy motives, no concrete, no architecture degree, just time, trial and error, just a stubborn belief that the land, no matter how steep, could still breathe life. Today, these terraces still work, still farmed, still repaired, and still respected. No bulldozers, no shortcuts. The old ways survive not because they fight the future, but because they prove something rare, that tradition, once deeply rooted, can outlast any storm. If the dragon's spine is muscle and bone, then water is its blood. The river flows quietly, no pumps, no engines, weaving through ancient canals from mountain springs down to every terrace below. This hydraulic dance isn't random. It's the secret life of terraces, why they've lasted centuries. Up on the mountain, rain and spring water gather in narrow channels and dirt ditches. Gravity becomes the farmer's silent partner. Water flows down each terrace, pooling gently before spilling into the next. This design, soft and seamless, ensures every rice patch gets just the right amount of water, no more, no less, no valves or switches. Control comes from delicate gates made of stone or wood, adjusted by hand and habit. If one terrace floods, the next might drown. If there's a leak, a drought could strike. So the villagers, guardians of this fragile system, walk the mountain ridges daily, checking, adjusting, listening to the water's song. It's more like playing an instrument than farming. One wrong note and the whole tune falls apart. But water doesn't just feed the rice, it reflects the sky. Come, spring, when terraces start flooding, the fields turn to glass. They mirror clouds, the sun, even stars on a clear night. Visitors often describe the place as surreal, like the mountain became a living mirror, reflecting both heaven and earth. Then summer arrives. Water thickens with green stalks. The reflections fade, replaced by motion rice, swaying like emerald seas in the breeze. By fall, the water sparkles beneath golden ripe fields. And in winter, when farming stops, snow and frost replace flowing water. The dragon sleeps, but the canals remain quiet veins waiting for spring. Time here flows differently, not by the clock, but by humidity, by the first waters of Thor's mountain, by the chorus of frogs returning, by the scent of wet earth. In a world obsessed with seconds, the people of Long Titch still count by seasons and drops. So the dragon doesn't live by fire and flight, but in gentle ripples, softly moving through a living masterpiece made of stone and soil. Spring in the Long G Mountains doesn't start with flowers, but with water. When snow melts on higher peaks, streams rush down, breathing life into waiting terraces. Smooth, mirror-like fields stand ready. The dragon stirs, and people prepare for the ritual that binds them to all generations before planting the first seeds. No big announcements, just quiet motion. Farmers, old and young, wake with the mist. They walk barefoot along narrow ridges, straw hats shading their eyes, baskets on their backs, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and mountain wind. The rice paddies, flooded just days ago, now shine like polished jade. This isn't a job for machines. Never was. Every seedling in the nursery beds is hand-planted, one stalk at a time, row by row. Workers step into eyes, baskets strapped on backs, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and mountain wind. Those meatballs soaked a few days ago now glisten like polished jade. This isn't a job for machines. Never has been. Every seedling planted by hand, one by one, row by row. Workers step into the cold water and gently press the soft stalks into the mud with delicate fingers. It's almost a sacred rhythm. Workers step into the cold water and gently press the soft stalks into the mud with delicate fingers. It's almost a sacred rhythm. Bend over, reach out, press. Repeat all day, sometimes for weeks. Kids run along, playing in the shallow water, copying the grown-ups. They don't learn from textbooks, but by standing in water, feeling the mud's resistance, learning distance by eye. That's how knowledge lives here lived, not just passed down by word of mouth. Farming isn't just labor, it's a ritual. People offer gifts to mountain gods. Songs rise up in some villages. Elders scatter the first handful of seedlings as a blessing. Every planted field is a promise to the land, to ancestors, to future grandkids. No rush. No one's hurrying the dragon. Nobody's racing up the mountain. Instead, the rhythm of planting becomes meditation, a slow dance between humans and nature, patience and purpose. And as days pass, green sprouts whisper up from the watery fields. From here on out, the terraces keep spreading, not just rice, but hope. Each seed a prayer, each row a quiet defiance against hunger and haste. And the cycle kicks off again, not with noise or fire, but with muddy hands and hearts turned skyward. The dragons awake, the mountain breathes, and the future is planted, seed by seed, scattered along ridges and tucked into terraces. Twists is the dragon's backbone. Villages like Pingan, Dazai, and Jingan aren't just settlements. They're living heritage museums where every house, path, and balcony clings to the mountain like an unfading memory. Houses built on wooden stilts to keep dry from rain and steep slopes. Their dark, slanting roofs mirror the lines of the houses they overlook. From above, they look like wooden lanterns drifting on green waves. Inside, life's simple, warm, and deeply communal. Multiple generations under one roof, meals cooked over wood fires. The smell of rice wine and bamboo smoke fills the mountain air. The people here belong to ethnic minorities, the Zhuang and Red Dao, each with their own language, customs, and stories. You'd spot the Yao women right away. Their long black hair, never cut since childhood, rolled into elegant shapes atop their heads. Some let it flow like silky waterfalls when bathing in the river, a sight so graceful it's almost mythical. Even though modernization is creeping along mountain trails, traditions hold strong. Indigo-dyed hand-woven clothes, the creak of wooden looms in quiet rooms, music played on flutes and bronze drums during village festivals. Weddings still feature dance rituals. Harvest season still welcomed with song. Hospitality here isn't a transaction, it's reflex. Visitors are invited to sip tea brewed from local leaves, rice wine poured from carved gourds, and listen to stories passed down by elders who remember this mountain before electricity. They talk about dragons in the mist, ancestors who shaped the hills, and spirits still guarding the fields. Even though tourism now draws visitors worldwide, village life keeps its beat, mostly undisturbed. Rice keeps growing. Rituals still mark the seasons. Terraced fields, like people, survive not by fighting change, but by absorbing it slowly, carefully, like water trickling down one level at a time. Here, inside the dragon's coil, life isn't rushed. It flows, it echoes, it remembers. Walking through Longji's terraces is like passing through layers of legend. These hills aren't just dirt and rock. They're alive with stories whispered through bamboo groves and carried on the wind to villagers. These mountains aren't just land, they're sacred beings, made by gods, guarded by spirits, and home to stories handed down from generation to generation. The oldest legend tells of a sleeping dragon stretching across the mountain ridges. Its curled backbone is the terraced fields themselves. Locals believe those mountain curves weren't carved by humans, but are dragon scales rising and falling with its breath. When mist rolls in from the valley, blanketing the terraces in white, the dragon stirs, gently breathing in its sleep. Here's another tale about how those terraced fields came to be, all thanks to the kindness of the gods back in the famine days. The ancestors climbed up the mountain and prayed to the heavens. Yep, during the famine, the ancestors just went straight up the mountain and started praying to the sky. Moved by their devotion, the gods sent rain and showed them how to carve the hills into steps so rice could actually grow. Everyone followed along, and then surprise a dragon appeared to guide their hands. From that day on, they revered the mountain, never yelling across the fields, never chopping trees without a prayer first. These beliefs, not written down anywhere, they lived in songs sung during planting season, in incense burned before the growing season, in the silence of foggy mornings. Kids grew up hearing these stories, not as fairy tales, but as truths buried deep in the soil. Mock the dragon, you risk a bad harvest. Disrespect the spirits, you're basically inviting floods or droughts. Water has spirits too, and some farmers still offer sacrifices before letting spring water flow into the terraced fields. For the first time each year, a few drops of rice wine whispered prayers in the breath, not a show. Just a tradition as natural as tying your shoes. And whether you believe in dragons or not, there's something sacred hanging in the air. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the clouds, or maybe it's the quiet certainty that this place isn't just man's work. This story is still being told, not written in ink, but carved in stone, water, and rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone was a secret kept by these distant, silent mountains, known only to those who call it home, but no place, no matter how sacred, stays untouched forever. Roads come, power lines follow, tourists, cameras, and smartphones climb the hills alongside farmers. And these ancient, weathered terraces face a question they never had before. How do you survive in the modern world at first? There was worry. Some feared the mountain would be sold off in pieces to developers. That concrete would replace wood. That culture would become just a costume. But the people of Longji didn't just endure. They adapted, not by dropping the past, but by weaving the present into it. Bit by bit, villagers started opening their homes to guests, not as resorts, but as places to stay with family. Visitors enjoyed local dishes, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, fresh-picked greens from the morning. They slept in wooden stilt houses where the rooster's crow still signals dawn. This isn't a show. It's vivid, real, and practical, and farming goes on every season. Locals still flood the terraces, still plant by hand, still harvest with scythes worn smooth by time. Kids go to school by day but help in the fields at dusk. Tourism brings income, but rice brings life. They support each other. Some young villagers have left for the city, but many keep coming back. There's something magical about these rows of houses, something deeper than homesickness. It's the sound of water running through channels, the way stars reflect on the cakes, how the mountains teach patience. Local festivals get louder every year. Yes, now there are microphones where drums once were. Signs in Mandarin and English stand beside the sacred springs. But the rituals keep going. People still offer sacrifices. Elders still lead the songs. The dragon's backbone doesn't resist change. It absorbs it gently and with balance. The terraces survive not because they freeze in time, but because they breathe with it. Bend, adjust, but never break. In an age when tradition often gets sacrificed for progress. Long G quietly proves progress can be gentle if it wants to be. The old ways still have a place in the modern world, especially when they're this beautiful. The dragon's backbone never stands still. Every season, the plants shed their skin, change color, shift moods. While cities change year to year, these neighborhoods change week to week, not just lit by light, but by rhythm. Living here for a year is like watching a mountain breathe. Spring arrives like a giant mirror. The flooded terraces get ready for planting. There's still waters reflecting the sky like a silver glass. Clouds don't just drift above, they float beneath your feet too. Visitors say it feels like walking in heaven. The fields look empty but are actually packed with potential. Underneath, life's buzzing. Summer brings a fresh, vibrant green. Rice stalks shoot up straight and tall, blanketing the hills like a sparkling emerald waterfall from afar. Those terraces look like velvet ribbons stretching every which way. Warm, damp air, frogs croaking from the patties. The farmers slog through water from dawn till dusk, their hats bobbing like tiny sails on a jade sea. Autumn is the golden season, the harvest. Ripe rice terraces shine under the sun, glittering with grains. Fields ripple in the wind, and drums echo through villages. Families gather, songs rise, sticky rice is cooked. This isn't just a season, it's a full-on celebration. The dragon's fully awake, handing out its rewards. Winter makes the mountain quiet. Empty terraces. Water recedes. Sometimes snow falls, dusting the steps with soft white. Other times, frost clings like lace on the walls. No tools in the fields, no voices, just silence. The dragon sleeps, rests, waits. Each season writes a different poem. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn nurtures, winter rests. The beauty of the Ao Dai isn't just in its shape, but its cycle, how it accepts time without resistance, how it changes quietly, never needing a spotlight. Photographers chase the light here, hoping to snap an eternal moment, but the terraces don't freeze for anyone. They move, they breathe. They gently teach us that beauty isn't static. It's rhythm, practice, a promise renewed every season. And then the dragon returns not with roars or flames, but water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces aren't just fields. They're a vow silent, curved, carved into the mountainside, a promise passed hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's spine isn't just an agricultural marvel or engineering masterpiece. It's the story of what happens when people choose to live with the land, not fight it. Sure, the long ancestors might have moved to flatter valleys, but they stayed. They studied slopes, listened to rocks, followed water, and in doing so, turned the impossible into the normal feeding mountain villages. Every curve holds a lesson, not just about rice, but patience, heritage, care. These terraces weren't built in years or even decades. They took centuries. No shortcuts to harmony. No machine can copy the wisdom carved into each stone wall by worn hands and silent persistence. But nothing about them is frozen. The terraces are alive. They evolve. They bend with weather, human needs, the shape of the world. That's their secret. They never get stiff, always flexible, even now, as modern world climbs these hills with signals and screens. These lands hold strong. They change, but don't vanish because their roots aren't just in soil. They're in stories, rituals, and the simple, stubborn act of planting seeds and trusting the sky, walking. The dragon's spine is witnessing a pact between humans and the earth, a contract signed in sweat and sunshine, renewed after every harvest. It's a reminder that progress isn't always speed, and greatness doesn't. Stone walls built by rough hands and quiet persistence, but nothing about them is frozen in time. The terraced fields are alive. They evolve. They bend with the weather, human needs, and the shape of the world. That's their secret. They never stiffen up. They're always flexible, even now, as modern life climbs these hills with signals and screens. These lands remain intact. They change but don't vanish because their roots aren't just in the soil. They live in stories, rituals, and the simple, stubborn act of planting seeds and trusting the sky. Walking on, the dragon's spine is witnessing a pact between humans and the earth, a contract signed in sweat and sunlight, renewed after every harvest. It's a reminder that progress doesn't always mean speed, and greatness doesn't always arrive fast. Sometimes it whispers like a stream flowing over rocks, and maybe that's why terraces mean so much to many people, from farmers to tourists and dreamers alike, because they stand for what we almost forgot, that the most lasting things in this world aren't built with force, but with rhythm, humility, and time. The dragon sleeps, people endure, and the mountain remembers. Most visitors to Giza look up to the sky, drawn by the towering pyramid's silhouette, and the gaze of most visitors to Giza look up at the sky, drawn in by the soaring silhouettes of the pyramids and the gaze of the Great Sphinx. But few ask what hides beneath the sand, under the Nile, beneath centuries of forgotten waters, near the tranquil shallow waters by the ancient village of Abu Rash. Just a stone's throw from the Giza Plateau, a strange story is unfolding. It's about something huge, eroded and forgotten, an underwater sphinx. Local fishermen have passed down tales about it through generations. Its smooth back looks way too symmetrical and unnatural, a feline shape that doesn't quite fit the natural mold, half buried in mud and soggy sediment. When the Nile dries up during droughts, part of the riverbed pops up, curved rocks, grooves, and some folks say they're carved pores worn down, but unmistakably man-made. It's not. Sitting on any tourist trail, no signs, no velvet ropes, no tour buses nearby, just some thick reeds, brackish water, and silence. Adventurers who dared to go there say the place feels different, buzzing with energy, like memories still hang in the air underneath the mercenaries. Sonar scans picked up geometric patterns and what looked like deliberately placed blocks, but the real jaw-dropper is the claim that this statue, a sphinx-like block sunk near Giza, could be way older than the pyramids, like millennia older, not just decades. If true, it would totally upend the accepted timeline of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream says the Great Sphinx showed up around 2500 BC, but this underwater shape, if it's really carved, could belong to a time when the Sahara was still green and the Nile roared through lush wetlands. Of course, skeptics say it's just a misidentified rock, limestone shaped by water and wild imaginations. But the grooves, curves, and alignment with celestial markers raise way more questions than answers. This area hasn't been excavated yet. Official archaeologists mostly ignore it. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's everything. A relic not just of ancient Egypt, but of a whole world wiped out by floods and time, right now. This underwater sphinx just lies there, not sleeping, but waiting. And if it could talk, who knows what secrets it would spill, and why so many insist on not listening. The legend of the underwater sphinx shifted from folklore to global curiosity in the 1980s. That's when some independent researchers and divers started releasing strange reports. There were records of a giant lion statue partially sunk near the Giza Plateau. Early photos were grainy, blurry, and mostly ignored, but they sparked something unforgettable: curiosity, and more dangerously, suspicion. One of the strongest advocates was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed he saw a deeply weathered monument beneath mud and floodwaters during a short drought. He said this wasn't just a random rock or erosion phenomenon. It had geometry, legs, symmetry, and even a faint carved face, naturally. This challenged the traditional narrative. Egyptology relies on well-established structures and timelines. Most scholars hold that the Giza pyramids and Great Sphinx were built around 2500 BC under Pharaoh Khafre's reign, suggesting an older, partially submerged sphinx would force a rethink not just of Egyptian history, but of human civilization's timeline. Mainstream scholars responded cautiously, even with disdain, without peer-reviewed digs, carbon dating, or stratigraphic studies. This claim won't get respect. Many think this underwater sphinx is just a natural formation, limestone eroded by thousands of years of Nile floods and sediment wear in Egypt. They say nature often imitates intention. Wind, water, and time are master sculptors. But those photos keep circulating. Sonar data keeps showing strange patterns, way too regular, too smooth, too suggestive. Then come the theorists, writers, filmmakers, and historians that start spinning tales around this mystery. The Sphinx is a relic of a lost civilization, maybe Atlantis, or pre-dynastic Egyptians wiped out by the Sahara flood. Pre-dynastic Egyptians vanished in some Sahara desert flood. They point to water erosion patterns on the original Great Sphinx. They argue lost tech was at play and hint that what's under the Nile might be way older than we thought. This idea stuck around. The debate heated up, but the ground stayed quiet. No official digs happened. No museum claimed it. And the Sphinx, if that's true, still sits exactly where it belongs, buried in mud, stuck between legend and dirt. The idea that something near Giza predates the pyramids isn't just provocative, it's revolutionary. If the underwater Sphinx isn't just erosion or a coincidence, then Egypt's story doesn't start with the Fourth Dynasty. It starts way earlier, back when the Sahara was lush grassland and the Nile was wilder, bigger, and way less predictable. This possibility caught attention in the 1990s when geologist Dr. Robert Schoch studied the Great Sphinx. He argued the deep vertical weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure wasn't from wind and sand, but from heavy, ancient rainfall rain that hasn't hit the Giza Plateau since at least 7000 BC. That pushes the possible date of the Sphinx back thousands of years. Yep, way before the first pharaohs carved their names in stone. If water shaped the original Sphinx, then water might also be hiding an even bigger sibling. The so-called underwater Sphinx sits lower, near ancient floodplains. Some satellite images and ground-penetrating radar show possible foundations, rectangular outlines, and deliberate shapes, all buried under seasonal mud and water. These signs hint the site might be not only older than the Sphinx, but from a time before hieroglyphs existed in Egypt. Supporters of this theory point to Egypt's missing chapters, the gap between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of the first dynasties. During this time, the Nile changed course. Sahara flipped from wet grasslands to dry desert, and civilizations may have risen and fallen without a single record, wiped clean from history. The idea that an ancient, advanced people could build a monument this huge sounds crazy to mainstream historians. But is it Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was built around 9600 BCs by hunter-gatherers. It has huge carved stone pillars older than Stonehenge by thousands of years. Could Egypt be hiding a similar secret? An ancient culture marking land in stone long before papyrus recorded their stories. If the underwater Sphinx was built then, it would rewrite everything we know about human history. It wouldn't just hint at forgotten ruins, but a lost era, something that might have whispered to the Giza builders, leaving more than legends, maybe a sunken monument. Then forgotten, stone doesn't lie. It remembers everything. And around the underwater Sphinx site, it tells a quiet but persistent story, not just about time, but about water, layers of sediment, erosion marks, and flood patterns suggest a history from long before the desert dried out, long before the Nile settled into its usual flow, long before the pharaohs carved their names into history. Geologists examined photos and data from near Abu Rawash and found strange erosion signs. Smooth circular grooves showing the place was exposed to flowing water for a long time. Not wind, not sand, but rainfall and water movement, both missing from this area for thousands of years. Similar arguments were also made about the Great Sphinx, especially its enclosure wall. Critics of the standard timeline point out that the deep vertical grooves around the Sphinx don't match wind erosion. They mimic. The deep vertical grooves seen on the channels around the Sphinx don't look like wind erosion at all. Nope. They mimic rain, big, so prehistoric, all-day downpour rain, now, at the site where there might be an underwater Sphinx. We see the same signs, only this time it's hidden beneath a shallow flood basin. During times of low Nile flow or excavation, some parts of the structure are thought to poke above the water, lion-like curves, shoulders, and a platform so flat it screams not natural. Researchers checking out this area note that the basin has strong geological activity with high clay content. Researchers checking out the area noted the basin is geologically active, packed with clay, and evidence of wildly fluctuating ancient groundwater levels. The rocks there are heavily eroded, but not randomly. The wear follows the shape of the structure itself, tracing lines that scream purposeful carving. Then sinking beneath the surface, some sediment layers around the site date back to early Holocene times when Egypt was wetter, greener, and prone to massive floods. If a monument was carved back then, it could have stood for centuries before mud swallowed it, forgotten by migrating populations and buried under Nile silt drifting downstream. Skeptics say it's all just coincidence, natural shapes turned into legends through hopeful eyes. But water doesn't create symmetry. It doesn't clog pores. It doesn't form neat foundations or mimic the shape of the famous Sphinx just a few miles away. So the question digs deeper: if water erased this relic from sight, what else did it wash away, and more urgently, how much history is still hiding beneath the surface? If an underwater sphinx really exists, silent, carved, ancient, why hasn't anyone dug it up yet? Why is it still buried under mud and silence, ignored by archaeologists, brushed off by the government, and left to rot? The answer, like the artifact itself, lies beneath the surface. Egypt's archaeological authorities are all about protection, and that's fair. The country guards its ancient heritage with strict protocols, excavation permissions, and academic consistency, digging up any site, especially one that challenges the traditional timeline, requires permits, funding, international oversight, and most importantly, approval from the powers that be. And that approval usually comes with an unspoken rule: don't rewrite Egypt's history without a mountain of undeniable proof. And here's the catch: the so-called underwater sphinx has never been officially funded for excavation. Independent researchers, foreign scholars, and fringe theorists have poked around the area, but without official backing. Their findings remain anecdotal, suggestive, not conclusive. There's also the Nile factor. The river isn't static. It floods, recedes, and shifts over decades. The site believed to hold the monument floods regularly, often submerged most of the year. Excavation means draining the area, cutting off water, protecting nearby ecosystems, and managing structural damage from centuries of sediment pressure. That alone would take years, even decades. Then there's politics. A discovery this huge, if proven, wouldn't just rewrite timelines. It could challenge established narratives, bruise national pride, and attract media attention Egypt might rather avoid. The Antiquities Ministry prefers discoveries that boost Egypt's glory, not ones that question the foundation of its history. Some whisper that certain organizations might know more than they admit. Quiet preliminary studies have been done behind closed doors, but without public records, peer-reviewed results, or official government announcements. These claims get branded as conspiracy theories, so the monument stays buried, whether by accident or design. It remains under mud and skepticism, ironically, in a land obsessed with preserving the distant past. One of its biggest mysteries hides in plain sight, unacknowledged, unstudied, and unrecorded over time. But nothing stays buried forever for the ancient Egyptians. The Sphinx wasn't just a sculpture, it was a symbol, part guardian, part deity, part mystery, with a lion's body and official records over time, but nothing stays buried forever to the ancient Egyptians. The Sphinx wasn't just a sculpture, it was a symbol, part guardian, part deity, part mystery, with the body of a lion and the head of a human. The Sphinx stood for strength combined with wisdom, raw power tamed by royal intellect. It was a cosmic sentinel placed at the doorstep where gods meet mortals. Of course, the most famous is the Great Sphinx of Giza. Standing 66 feet tall, this giant has guarded the plateau for over 4,000 years, facing east, watching over the pharaoh's tombs. Its exact origin is still debated. Some say Khafra built it. Others think it's even older because of, well, reasons. The precise origins are still up for debate. Some claim Khafra built it. Others argue it might be older, because its face has been recarved over time. So, what if there's a second Sphinx, hidden underwater, possibly even older, just a few miles away? That would flip everything on its head. No records mention a twin Sphinx at Giza. Ancient texts, silent on this one, but later Greco-Roman tradition talks about guardians standing in balance, surrounding sacred spaces. In Egyptian architecture, symmetry is sacred. Temples often had two twin statues, twin obelisks, twin lion paths, so why not twin sphinxes? Some researchers think the so-called underwater sphinx isn't a copy, but the original prototype, the pre-dynastic version, copied on a larger scale later. If that's true, the idea of the Sphinx didn't come from the later builders, but from a forgotten culture with myths passed down, absorbed, then revamped. And if this monument predates writing, it might not be tied to pharaoh ideology at all. Its purpose could be astronomical, ritualistic, or even commemorative, marking a flood or a forgotten god. The lion shape isn't random. In ancient Egypt, lions symbolized the horizon, the gateway of dawn and dusk. A sphinx facing east forever watches the sun's rebirth. Carving it means freezing that sacred act in stone. Now imagine a statue carved before the pyramids, aligned, guarding, waiting. It doesn't just rewrite history. It would redefine Egyptian mythology, not the start of civilization, but the last echo of something way older. And the fact this symbol might be sleeping underwater just fits perfectly with its role as guardian of lost worlds. As whispers about the underwater sphinx ripple worldwide, a quiet divide has appeared deeper than sediment or rock. On one side, traditional Egyptology cautious, structured, consensus-driven academia. On the other, a growing community of independent researchers, alternative historians, and curious folks convinced something extraordinary is being overlooked. Mainstream scholars focus on evidence, peer-reviewed studies, stratigraphy, inscriptions, and carbon dating. Their caution isn't unwarranted. Egypt has tons of natural rocks, shaped like humans or animals, and mistaking them leads to misinformation. Archaeology needs to be careful. The past is fragile. It can't be pieced back, once broken by careless hands or media hype. But to others, caution has morphed into complacency. Independent investigators, many trained scientists or engineers outside this field, argue the underwater sphinx and similar anomalies deserve deeper study. They point to high-res satellite images showing unnatural symmetry, later scans revealing rectangular foundations beneath mud layers, and erosion patterns that seem designed, not random. They also question the political motives behind the silence. Tourism money flows through these damaged sites. A new sphinx, especially one threatening the established timeline, could shatter Egypt's narrative and power structure. They say the real fear isn't fraud, but rewriting everything. Books, documentaries, podcasts, and conferences. You have to be careful. The past is fragile. Once broken by careless hands or media hype, it can't be rebuilt. But for others, caution has morphed into complacency. Independent investigators, many of them scientists or engineers from outside the field, argue that the underwater sphinx and other similar anomalies deserve serious study. They point to high-res satellite images showing unnatural symmetry, to LiDAR scans revealing rectangular foundations beneath layers of mud, plus erosion patterns that look designed, not chaotic. They also question the political motives behind the silence. Tourism money flows through these heavily damaged sites. A new sphinx, especially one that could threaten the timeline, would disrupt Egypt's narrative and power structure. They say the fear isn't fraud, but rewriting everything. Books, documentaries, podcasts, and conferences now regularly mention the underwater sphinx. It's become a symbol of hidden history, a rallying cry, and a cautionary tale. Supporters call for public digs. Opponents warn of pseudoscience. The truth, as usual, gets lost in the middle, buried under voices thick as Nile silt. The divide isn't just academic, it's emotional. It shows how we approach the past. Do we only trust what's confirmed, or do we follow hints left just out of reach? The underwater sphinx forces that question into the light. It's not just a rock or relic. It's a test of how curious we're allowed to be, and as long as it's still being unearthed, both sides will keep arguing over a monument that says nothing but could change everything. There's something haunting about a mystery hiding in plain sight, especially when it bears the face of a lion staring up silently from the mud. The so-called underwater sphinx near Giza might be real or not, but its pull is undeniable. Ancient silence. The so-called underwater sphinx near Giza might be real or just a legend, but you can't deny its pull. It stirs something in us, a craving not just to discover, but to remember, because deep down, the story of a forgotten monument touches something older than archaeology itself. The human feeling of loss. We always live beside ruins. Cities collapse, languages die, civilizations vanish under waves, sand, and dust. We look to the past not just for answers, but to find identity. Who are we? Where did our story begin, and what have we forgotten along the way? The rush toward progress, if that underwater sphinx is real, if it was hand-carved before history was even written down, then it becomes way more than just a relic. It's a voice from a chapter we didn't even know existed, a landmark from an age when humans might have understood the stars differently, respected Earth more, or carried myths we can only guess at. Some folks believe it belongs to a lost advanced prehistoric culture wiped out by a global disaster, a theory often brushed off as extreme, but true or not, the emotional weight stays. Imagining a monument carved long before the pyramids, submerged by rising waters and then erased. That's the real fragility of civilization right there. And maybe that's why the story sticks. It reminds us time isn't a straight line. Empires are temporary, and even stone can vanish if the river flows long enough. But more importantly, it reminds us the discovery isn't over, that Earth still hides secrets No textbook will tell you, in an age of instant answers and global data. The underwater sphinx is a rare thing, a question without a solution, a possibility. A mystery that drones and algorithms just can't crack yet, and whether it's natural rock or a forgotten artifact. It still matters because it makes us think. Who knows if the past is deeper than we imagine? Wonder if myths hold memories. Wonder what's hiding beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. The underwater sphinx at Giza, carved or accidental, confirmed or denied, still rests where it always did, below the surface, beneath mud, water, and the weight of time. No plaque, no name, no spotlight, yet it quietly speaks when there's no answer. For every relic we dig up in Egypt, many more lie buried, waiting, some too fragile to uncover, others lost in the wild Nile currents, sunk under mud and mystery, and a rare few, like this one, sit in plain sight, ignored not because they're unimportant, but because they raise questions we're just not ready to answer. Maybe that's why the underwater sphinx is so powerful. Not size, not age, but silence. It forces us to face the limits of what we know and the discomfort of what we might have missed. The truth is, we might never excavate it. Politics, money, and tradition build walls taller than any tomb. But that doesn't mean it's irrelevant. Far from it, the monument's darkness turns it into a mirror, reflecting not just what's buried, but what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. It also reminds us, history isn't a closed book. It's a living puzzle scattered across landscapes and shorelines, waiting for tides to turn, minds to change, or a brave question to stir the dust. Maybe one day the waters will recede and the full form will rise. Pause. Show up with face and all. Maybe radar will confirm what legends have long suspected, or maybe the mystery will remain, passed from generation to generation, like a whisper between stones, but whether monument or mirage. The underwater sphinx has fulfilled its greatest purpose. It sparked imagination, and in a world drowning in certainty, that might be the best gift of all, because maybe the oldest things aren't just buried in sand or time. Maybe they're buried inside us, a long suspected legend, or maybe the mystery just stays there, passed down from one generation to the next, like whispers between the stones. But whether monument or mirage, the underwater sphinx has fulfilled its greatest purpose. It sparked the imagination, and in a world drowning in certainty, that might just be the greatest gift of all, because maybe the oldest things aren't just buried in sand or time. Maybe they're buried inside us, still. Our need to explore, remember, and believe that somewhere out there, beneath waves or deserts, the past still breathes and is waiting to be found.